Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to Illinois Stories. I'm Mark McDonald in Decatur at the Madden Arts Center, the Ann Lloyd Gallery. And I love to come to this place because they always have unique exhibits at this space. Now, we don't have a high percentage of Norwegian heritage in central Illinois, but we do have quite a collection. In fact, maybe one of the best collections in the United States. And Sue, when you started thinking about this, you thought, you know what? This is something we probably shouldn't pass up. Even though Norwegian art may not be everybody's cup of tea, you've got a collection here to tap that was pretty astounding.
Oh, it's really amazing. Actually, it started because 3 or 4 years ago, one of the gentlemen on my gallery selection committee was sort of brainstorming with me, and he said, you know, Marilyn Madden has some things from Norway. You might want to check them out. Some things from Norway, right? So when I went to Marilyn's house, I was totally blown away by this amazing collection, and it was really evident that an entire exhibit could come from her collection, and then some.
And in fact, you probably had trouble choosing because I understand that this is a very small portion of her collection.
Absolutely, but it was a great partnership because as Marilyn would take me around her house, she would tell me the stories about the pieces and the significance in the Norwegian culture. And every time I would come to pack some up, she would have new pieces for me. And it really helped me to see what was important to the culture and to make selections. So it was a great partnership in deciding what to put in the exhibit.
Wow. Okay, you and I are going to breeze through.
Great.
And then we're going to hear more about who the Maddens are and how they came by to, acquiring this collection. And then we'll come back through and really sort of pick it apart. But let's just kind of breeze through here first. One thing I really love about Norwegian art, as you look at some of these things, everything's decorated. They don't leave anything alone, do they?
Absolutely, and that comes from that Viking heritage. And I thought, how fitting, because the Norwegians love the decorative, and they are also storytellers. So what a great thing to have the art and the artifacts tell the story of Norway. And so that was kind of the intent in putting the exhibit together and selecting items that would bring to light different parts of the culture, the farming culture, the fact that they live in a country that's wintry for something like 6 months out of the year. On the other hand, when it brightens up and the sun comes out, the florals are absolutely stunning.
Well, in the land of this is the time of year that they relish over there. It never gets dark in parts of Norway,
Wouldn't that be
the old
fun?
land of the midnight sun, yeah.
And the flowers are so important too, just the flower image. In fact, you'll see throughout the exhibit, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, the acanthus leaf, that kind of curly Q sort of leaf that is pervasive in a lot of the designs, and the floral is so important. So we wanted to have both the fine art and the folk arts that show that.
Yeah, people might not know why Marilyn was so involved in this, but turns out her parents were immigrants from Norway.
That's right.
And so she was she had a chance to got an interest in this from that, I guess.
Well, from that, but also her husband, who became so enamored with the culture, and I think that just really got the collection going.
Yeah. And we have a dear friend of his. He's passed away, but we have a dear friend of his here to talk about how all that evolved, too.
Right.
So we'll do that. But silversmithing, of course, and ceramics.
A lot of textiles also. You'll notice that throughout the entire exhibit, the weavings are kind of woven into the fabric of the art.
Right there.
Yeah, that's right. Beautiful weavings, and using lots of natural kinds of fibers. For instance, the wool fibers, and fishing is a part of the country and the culture and their livelihoods. So we tried to kind of show how the people live, but through the artwork. And because making things beautiful is so much a part of the culture, having the artwork shows that. They spent their winters creating things. If you can't be farming, you might be carving, you might be painting. And I thought it was really interesting that the men were the ones who were the rosemalers to begin with.
And we're going to hear that term a lot. We'll explain what rosemall is as we go along, but just to give people a hint, They painted everything. I mean, it's chairs, buckets, trunks, anything. Everything got painted.
Well, you know, if
It's
you
remarkable.
have to be stuck inside, you may as well have everything beautiful, right?
Exactly, exactly. Even though it's so dark, you can't really see much. But
and they were landowners, and their farms and their homes were really important to them, and so having that beautiful was important to them. And I'm glad we ended up here talking about that, because that whole heritage of craftsmanship and decorative arts comes from the Viking heritage. And so we have a section here in the exhibit that introduces that Viking background.
And that's a lot of this right over here, right?
That's right. And you can see here, you can see that acanthus leaf that I was talking about, and also some of the geometrics. You see the geometrics show up a lot in the textile work that's done. And
As long as we are here, let's take a look at these. Are these called ale bowls?
Ale bowls,
Ale
yes.
bowls. These are interesting because they're double-handled. Can I touch one of these?
You absolutely can.
And
Pick
I
it
guess
up.
what they would
Have a
do
drink.
is, okay, it's full of ale. You assume it's full of ale. So
Right.
this was to be shared. So I would drink it, and then it's got two handles, so I can hand it off to you.
Yes, you can. Isn't that handy?
And then-
I can tip the cup. Isn't that great?
And some of them are really big.
And look at the way that
Oh, yeah.
the shape of the ale bowls echoes the shape of their ships, right?
sure-
the symmetry
it
of
certainly
their
does.
ships.
Lovely, lovely. And there's lots of examples of that. I guess they like their ale over there, huh?
They did. And the ale bowl had sort of a place of honor at the table.
Terrific. And look at these horns. Now these are real horns, I assume.
They
and
are.
They were to be drank out of two, weren't they?
That's right. That's right. And feasting was a big thing, I understand, among the Vikings. I wasn't around back then, but and once the ale began, it flowed and it flowed and it flowed.
Life can be tough, and as long as life is tough, you might as well feast, right?
You know what's fun though to hear as part of the story, we always think of the Vikings as being those who pillage and plunder.
Yeah.
But as I researched, really most of them were settlers and traders, and they were explorers. And their exploration brought so much to the North Country and became the foundation of this really beautiful culture.
Well, thank you. We'll visit with you a little bit later.
Great.
Okay? Well, Bruce Leonard, we are going to be saying Dean Madden's name many times during this program. He and his wife, Marilyn, collected all these items that are in this exhibit, and you were a dear friend of Dean Madden, were you not?
Yes, Dean and I have been friends for nearly 70 years. This collection actually started with Dean. Dean is of Irish descent, but he had the good fortune to marry a Norwegian girl, Marilyn Madden. Her mother and father came from Stavanger, Norway. Dean first met a gentleman you are going to see later on by the name of Sigmund Arseth, who is one of Norway's premier rosemalers. Rosemalling is rose painting. It's one of the major crafts of Norway, which are wood carving and weaving and rosemalling.
And we'll get to that.
Yes.
But let's talk about Dean a little bit first. He had such a collection, he and his wife had such a collection that he was actually awarded a very high honor by the Norway, the King of Norway?
Dean was awarded the St. Olaf Medal, which is right here, by the King of Norway for his collection of Norwegian artifacts and his interest in Norwegian culture.
Yeah, and of course spreading the word of the heritage, the Norwegian heritage to the United States, I'm sure was a wonderful thing for them.
Dean Madden has a cottage
love this.
up in Door County, Wisconsin, which is right here. And this was built by Dean's father-in-law, Rasmus Amdahl, Marilyn's father. And Dean asked this Norwegian artist to come up there and rosemal his cottage. And Sigmund Arseth came up there every year for about 11 years.
Now, the one we're looking at now, this is also on the property.
Yes, this building here is called a stabur. A stabur is a Norwegian building. The upper part is a guest house, and the lower part is for grain storage for their cattle during the winter.
Now, did they actually dismantle that and bring that over from Norway?
Dean bought this building in Norway, had it completely dismantled, shipped over, dumped in Milwaukee on a truck, brought up to this driveway with a pile of logs.
Oh, man.
And Dean's father-in-law, Rasmus Amdahl, actually assembled it with some
Put
help.
it together for him, and it's still there, and
It
the
is still
family
there.
still owns the property,
Still owns
and
the
that's the
property.
guest house, huh?
And then right next to this one is a smaller building, which is just this amount here. It's called a Vesselborg, and it is also a guest house.
Now, these pictures below it, these are in the cottage, right?
No, these pictures here are in this building here.
Oh, okay, in the guest house.
Yes, you can see the example of what we're going to be
look at the
talking about
painting.
rose malling
Yeah.
later on. A cobble stool, which is a Norwegian
Yeah,
stool.
and look at the
wood
carving, too.
carving.
Oh, my goodness.
Dean Madden always said that Rasmus Amdahl, his father-in-law, could do more with a hatchet than he could do with a basin full of power tools.
Yeah. Let's show a picture of him, because now this is Marilyn's parents, and he's the one you're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
Marie and Rasmus Amdahl.
He was a great artist and craftsman.
He was a carpenter.
wasn't
He was a carpenter.
Uh-huh.
He was a master carpenter when he came over here as a young man.
And now we also mentioned Sigmund Arseth. Now this is a good example of an oil painting that he did, and this looks like it's right out of the valleys of Norway.
That's right. You're going to be talking about Sigmund Arseth later on, but this is one of his paintings that he did after he gave up rose malling.
Okay, now you mentioned rose malling, and we're going to hear that word a lot too. Let's go take a look at some of his examples of rose
Very good.
malling, because he's got a terrific exhibit of these round paintings over here. One thing I like about this rose malling, as you describe it, the Norwegians seem to paint everything.
That's right.
Every item they use ends up being painted, and that's sort of the rose malling technique, isn't it?
Rose malling is one of the crafts of Norway. Here are several examples of rose malling. These are done
Wow.
on plates. But they rose malled everything. They rose malled porringers. They rose malled chairs. As I told Mark, if you stand still too long in Norway, you become rose malled.
Or carved, one or the
Yes.
other.
When Sigmund Arseth became a master rose maller of Norway, the oil in the paintings bothered his eyes, so he went to another type of art, and that is over here. He called it sigmaling.
It's the big one to the left. Mm-hmm. And what's that one called now?
Sigmaling. He called this style of our painting sigmaling, which is a cross between rose malling and his own invention of sigmaling.
Ah, okay, after his own name, sigmaling, okay.
That is another example of it over here.
And it's the big painting to the right.
Yes.
And these almost look abstract. You know, I know they're. I can see the figures.
Can you
and I
see
can
faces in there?
Oh, sure you can, but it's rather abstract, isn't it?
Yes.
And now Sigmund, is that his right name?
Sigmund, yes.
Sigmund. He was also a native of Norway, but he
Yes.
was working in the States. He was an immigrant to the States, and he was working for big companies.
He was
wasn't
not an immigrant.
Oh, he wasn't.
No, he came here about a month or two at a time, but he always returned to Norway. No, he was always a citizen of Norway.
I see. And would you say he was Norway's most famous painter?
I would say eventually, prior to his death, he did become Norway's most famous artist.
Yeah. And he passed away a long time ago?
He
or
passed away
recently?
last December, I think December 15th.
Very recently.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. And if Mr. Madden had been alive at that time, that would have broken his heart, I'll bet.
It
wouldn't
certainly would have, because he was very, very close to Sigmund. He discovered Sigmund when he was 20 years old, doing an example of rose malling in a department store in St. Louis, and brought him up to the cottage for many, many years to rose mall. And then eventually, Dean and Sigmund did 6 tours to Norway, in which Dean put it together, brought people from Decatur over to Norway, and Sigmund took over from there.
Wow.
So
What a tour guide to have, huh?
he was a great guy.
What a tour
He was
guide.
a great friend.
Yeah.
He was a great friend.
Bruce, thank you for this visit.
You're entirely welcome. I'm pleasure. I'm glad to do something for Dean.
Certainly appreciate it.
Bye.
Well, everything's hand-carved, it seems like, Sue. And I think we're looking at the musician right now. I think we're looking at the fiddler. And he leads the wedding party, huh?
He does. That's a tradition, and he's actually playing the Hardanger fiddle, which is a national instrument, and it's a different kind of fiddle than our fiddles. It's actually made slightly differently than our fiddles. And you can see as the circle goes around, he's followed by the bride and groom, the bride having the crown on her head.
The groom goes first, and then the bride. Okay.
Well, you know, it's a man's world, Mark. And followed by the parents. And as you come around, you can see the bridal party or the guests. And this parade of sorts is a tradition to be, in the olden days, on horses, not necessarily today, but just to be led by the music. And music is a very important part of the culture as well, so I think that's a lovely tradition. And you can see that they're all wearing the traditional bunad, which of course we have here on the mannequin as well. This is actually Marilyn's bunad. She wore this for festive occasions.
Oh, it's beautiful.
And
it's beautiful.
I want to point out the lace in particular. This is Hardanger lace. Hardanger is one of the regions,
That was the name of the fiddle too that you
That's
mentioned.
exactly right. And this is a cut-out type of lace, and you'll see it kind of crop up in other places as well, but it's a lovely handwork.
Now, bunad means an outfit, I guess.
It's clothing.
male or female, right? Because there are examples right here of a variety of bunads, and these are regions, right?
That's right.
I don't know how to pronounce Norwegian, but Rogaland and Amli and Hallingdal, those are all examples of the type of clothing that people from those regions wear. It's
That's
nice.
right, and they have very specific detailing depending upon what region they come from, and this is an important part of the heritage from each one of those regions. And in fact, because the rose mauling is also named for the region, you'll hear those same names. You'll hear Hallingdal and you'll hear Telemark. So everything was very much classified, if you will, by the different regions of the country.
And they lived in these valleys, so a lot of times they were isolated, and,
Right.
and they would have their own characteristics that they really were very distinctive.
Exactly.
Now, we've heard about, okay, we've seen Sigmund's work in this exhibit before, and this is really
Isn't it beautiful?
What an honor this was, because we mentioned Marilyn, the owner of this collection, and she was Rasmus's daughter, and Sigmund painted this. We know this for her because it's her birthday.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, be darned! Isn't that an honor?
And let me tell you, once you have tried to do the rose mauling brush strokes, you have an incredible appreciation for the skill that it takes to do these. It's absolutely stunning.
It's just loaded with color and design, just loaded.
And you see a lot of this color scheme that's sort of a play on the red, yellow, and blue. You see those colors a lot throughout much of the display. I want to call your attention over here. This is really interesting. This is a traditional solia, which is a piece of jewelry. And see these little tiny spoon-like shapes? Those are always hanging down from the solia. And if you look at the sort of geometric design around the neckline and around the sleeves, this was sort of a good luck thing.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, to protect from evil spirits that might come through the openings.
The trolls. The trolls.
Maybe the
Like we
trolls.
saw earlier. Okay, now, and more examples of bunad, I guess, traditional bunads, and these are the dolls.
That's right.
I guess they collect dolls too, just like every other culture, don't they?
Well, and you can see that the dolls have a different sort of style vest on, a different style of the print, but you still see the floral that you see through so much of the design throughout all of the artwork. And really the embroidery and the stitchery and the lace work, all of that was a very important skill for the girls to learn. And in fact, a girl would practice all her life to become good at these skills, and the quality of her work would sort of show her future capabilities as
I
a
see.
wife.
Okay, all right. She might be able to follow him on that horse someday, huh? Now, this is interesting. See this little painted box here?
Right.
We're going to go over here and we're going to see a large collection of those, okay? Because it seems that they build, carve, and paint boxes, anything that's going to hold an item.
Lots of carriers.
These are porragers, right?
Yes, it's called a porrager, and it is carried by its handle.
Here, let me remove the pin.
Please.
And you can maybe take the lid
So
off that for
the
us.
lids are held on by the little pin,
Here's the
and
pin.
the porridge would be in another container, but carried inside of here. What a fancy way to carry your porridge,
And why
right?
would you carry porridge anyway? Unless you,
Well, you might go to a picnic or to
Yeah.
someone's home to eat, and these are perfectly made, right?
They
Tightly
are. They're
made. There
very
you go.
tight
And your
fit.
pin
So
goes
that
right in
pin
there
will
to hold
slide
your
right
lid
back
on.
in there. There we go. Sure did. And these three are porringers. I love these down here. These are lunch boxes, or at least this one is a lunch
This is called
box.
a tina. And I want to show this up close because this is an example of the bent wood. I think people in America think of bent wood like bent wood rockers, right? And the wood is bent around the sides, and then it's overlapped, and it's literally tied together with the whatever they've used, leather or twine,
Probably
or it
leather.
depends upon the type of item that it is. But the rose malling throughout.
And a cheese box. And
Right.
here, I love this. Look at the size of this ale bowl. Now that's for a monster appetite there. You got to be
Well,
really thirsty to want to drink
and
out of that.
The ale bowls that are like an actual bowl, you'll often see this writing. It'll be some sort of positive saying that will be written around the perimeter of the bowl.
When Marilyn's mother came over, she had an old spinning wheel, and she brought it with her. This
Right.
was one way she got started in her household.
That's right.
And when they brought these items with them from Norway, they brought them in a trunk, like that one, right?
They did. And a spinning wheel and a trunk were probably the most common items to find in a Norwegian immigrant's home here in America. They actually dismantled the spinning wheels and to put them in the trunk to bring them over here. This comes from about the early 1800s because it belonged to Marilyn's grandmother. And it's made to spin either wool. We have both wool and we have flax here, as a matter of fact. So it could spin either one of those.
Now, when they in the old country, the cottages that they lived in these valleys were usually small.
Right.
So they had these chairs that they could kind of tuck into a corner that didn't take up much of the
Yes.
room. And interestingly, some of these, many of them were carved out of a single piece of wood.
That's right. It's called a kubestol, and it's carved from a single log, and you can really see the natural log inside of here. And then, of course, the seat is separate and added on. This is a very old child's piece, but quite often the kubestols are rose malled, and you can see right
Yeah,
next
and
to
that's
it,
the
this
one
green
behind
one
it.
has the
Look,
rose malling
God,
all
they
over it.
decorate. Look how they've done that.
And sometimes they're carved very elaborately. We have the other one over by the Viking section of the exhibit that's carved very elaborately. And I just want to point out again that acanthus leaf. You can see that acanthus leaf so clearly here in all of the rose malling and in the rose malling on the trunk. It just keeps cropping up everywhere.
It does. It's become a style all its own.
It has a life.
Yeah, it does. Now, we talked about what a porringer was, and not to dwell on them anymore, but some of them are intricately carved like this one.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And again, not only with that acanthus leaf, but also with this kind of crisscross pattern that you see in some of the Viking designs and then repeating into the rose malling.
Now, this is really interesting. We have an example of 5 what they're called
Monglitra.
thank you. And these were the ironing board before they thought of using steam, I guess.
Yeah, the iron actually. And we think of a hot iron to press over our clothing, but this was a cool iron. And just like everything else, they made even the most utilitarian objects really beautiful, and you can see that by the carving on these. And if you can imagine, this required you to roll your still damp cloth around a tubular form, and then to roll this over that, and that would sort of smooth out the wrinkles. But cool, not hot, right?
Lot of work.
Really interesting is that these were kind of a prized possession because the gentlemen would show off their carving skills by carving a really beautiful monglitra, and this was given as a betrothal gift.
Will you marry me? Here's an iron.
That's right. You think that would go over really big nowadays? I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe if it were this beautiful, right?
Okay, this, I love this because I think it's called a lure.
Lure.
But this is, I thought, well, what would that be used for? And you say that was actually used as a horn.
That's right, it's a horn, and it's wrapped in the birch bark. And if you look at the little statue of
Demonstrated here.
the young lady there in her bunad.
And she would be maybe calling the cattle back, or
that's right.
or maybe calling the kids home for dinner. Who knows?
That's right. And it's all done by embouchure, right? You're just blowing, you don't have any holes to create your tone, but you're just blowing through the horn.
Another example of some real intricate work. Now, I kind of like these up here, these calendars. This is a replica of a very old calendar, and as you describe it to me, these figures or these carvings at the top are significant days, holidays or holy days or something of the year.
That's right. It's called a primstaff, and it's a calendar stick. And really, being isolated out at these farms, for instance, it was very important for everybody to kind of follow the same calendar.
Yeah.
You had to pay attention to those holy days of the year, and there were certain times when you did your harvest, and everything was in order. And so you followed along on your calendar stick.
Yeah, well, you were isolated, and you had to know when the meeting was or when the celebration was. You didn't want to miss it.
That's right. And life very much revolved. Once the country was Christianized, it was very much revolved around their holy days.
And then this is a real upgrade here because this became much more modern. This calendar actually has every day of the week and every day of the month and every month of the year on it.
Perpetual.
Yeah, perpetual calendar. Terrific. Norway. The Marilyn and Dean Madden collection will be open here through the month of July, and it's free. With another Illinois story in Decatur, I'm Mark McDonald. Thanks for watching.
Illinois Stories is brought to you by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by the support of viewers like you. Thank you. For a DVD copy of the program you've just seen, send $19.95 to Network Knowledge, P.O. Box 6248, Springfield, Illinois 62708. Be sure to include the program name, subject, and when the program aired. You can also order with your credit card by calling 800-232-3605.